Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. This is Airwindows Mastering. And here's the thing, you might not have heard that much of what I just did. I should have hit the drive slider actually. And if we look at Airwindows Mastering, we see that I just moved these knobs all over the place. I will tell you what's going on here. This is my system for doing mastering for my own stuff that I've been working on for some time. It involves like a 4-band Kalman filter system with the Air 4 boosting and the high frequency control and so on. And you can also see it with Airwindows meter, which is a little bit smushed because I've made it the same width as the plugin. But that's the idea. My take on what mastering can mean in the Airwindows universe is you probably shouldn't be using Airwindows meter in mixing. It'll make you focus on these little dots. And you don't want to be making mixing decisions based on what it makes the little dots do. You want to be doing mixing decisions based on like the kind of information that I have available in Console X. I do have meters in Console X. I've designed them to be more along the lines of giving feedback that I can use in a mix to get a sense of how loud things are, what sort of tonal color they are. And the deal with Airwindows meter is it's giving me behaviors that I don't think are actually useful for mixing, but it's very suitable for mastering, and that's what this plugin is. So what do we have? Well, I'll fire this up. I also have an upcoming track that I'll be using mastering on, although I won't be using it over headphones because the decisions that I make for the final version of that need to be over the speakers. So we've got glue, scope, skronk, girth, and drive. And pretty much all of this stuff exists in other Airwindows plugins in one way, shape, or form. Also, there's a dither control, so I can choose dark, 10/9, which is the same as monitoring 3, TPDF wide, Paul wide, or not just another dither. The way that worked is these are all versions of what's in monitoring. Not just another dither is the original monitoring. Dark is monitoring 2, if I remember correctly. And the 10/9 is monitoring 3, which is a high energy noise shaper going into an instance of dark. So all of this stuff going on. And let's bump forwards into a different track and start fooling with things. Because as you see, we've got meter showing here. I'll have to kind of keep it playing in order to be able to see what that does, but seasons. Right away, you see that the mix that I did has a lot of sibilance and incredibly hot spikes in the second panel of meter, which is slew. Seasons. And I can play that over and over and have it show up. We've got a lot of brightness going on here. That is what glue is for. Let me see if I can set this up to loop. Might work. Seasons. For a precious time, we love beyond. In fact, let me continue to move it around so that it hits just that spike. I don't think that did it, but we'll find out. Seasons. Nope, let's go through it. Give me a second, I'll figure this out. I'll make it work. Seasons. This is going to sound a little obnoxious, but I want to show you what this does. So if we loop this, we see that there's this big spike on the meter. If we use scope, scope is effectively like microscope. That's basically the airband EQ, and if you pull it back, you will remove some of that. You see it's a little bit smaller, or way hotter. Now you might not want to have scope cranked up on a master, because you're basically just adding high frequency glitter, and not all sounds want that. Like, yeah, people often go for brightness in like making stuff more, but as you can see, it becomes abrasive. However, here's where the glue control comes in, and that's what I was using. It's the control in Air4, but I have set it up so that as you push it in, it starts restraining the amount of excess you can produce, and will leave scope on. Watch this. To about halfway, we've already pulled it back. We can completely control that high frequency overspill. It's your high frequency restrictor. It's the same thing that is in Air, and you don't have to do the boosts going into it. But you can use enough of this glue factor to stop the high frequencies from blasting all the way through the second level meter, the slew meter. So that's something that I'll be finding an appropriate setting for this mix that I've got. And I'll scoot it back over so we can play more of it rather than just only the sibilants. These other controls also do relevant things. Drive, for instance. I can use drive to dial everything back. It will go into the Kalman filters more gently. So if you're doing anything with that and it seems to be a little exaggerated, you can cool it off. This also applies to scope. So when we had boosted scope and it got all distorty on us, like this, and it was rather aggressive, you can pull drive back. And even though we have a massive high frequency boost going on, which you shouldn't do for mastering, it made it sound more reasonable. By the same token, we can also push drive, but it's not going to do a crazy uber loudinating thing. It is, in fact, going to go into the relevant Kalman filters and drive them into nonlinearity. But in this case, drive is doing the kind of thing that I had on the plugin, oh God, what was that plugin? Plugin that I did just recently, Zoom. This has a independent Zoom nonlinearity on each of the bands. Listen to what this does. Let's go to the guitar section. Here's how it was mixed. And if I wanted to push it, also watch what the dots do. We pushed everything a little harder. We can pull it right back again. And that can sort of set up the amount of density and aggression in each of these, I don't know, call them tone colors, because they're Kalman filters, so they're not literally frequency bands. Scope, again, is all our crazy super high frequency brightness. Skronk and girth are the two bands we have left. I have set it up so that, because I was not able to use the subsonics band effectively, I've dialed it in so that what happens with the subsonics band, rather than trying to dial it in and do things with it, which tended to make weird stuff happen below the level of any real subwoofers, instead I've got that running essentially at a flat. And if you cut girth, what you end up doing is retaining some of that subband. And if you boost girth, you're not boosting as much. Let me just demonstrate it. Okay, I'm going to bounce to a different section, like maybe over here. So listen to what girth does. Look at what happened at the top here. No matter what you choose to do with the boost or cut, you'll get a color to it because they're all Kalman filters, so they don't behave exactly like some really tight filter or whatever. It's more of a character. Wait till you hear what happens with skronk. But as far as this girth is concerned, again, watch what the top level meter is doing with regard to the fairly full low frequency section of this verse. Has a Rickenbacker bass. It's got a bunch of stuff going on. I believe there's electronic drums in there as well. If we have it flat, it's the way that I did it. And then I can take those lows and push them up to the top end fairly cleanly. And only when I crank girth out all the way do you wind up with everything literally, like once I finish fooling with it a little bit, I'll show you what girth and drive both sound like at the same time. And here it's a spacious sound, or heavily boosted. It's surprising how much action you get out of a small amount of boost. And then if you did both, you get this completely overwhelming effect, which is not what you want. Again, I have meters set up in such a way where you don't want to pin everything to the top of the level meter. This is showing peaks, and I'm not even showing you RMS, but I don't care about RMS because peaks is what's going to make people react to your music. And you get to dial this stuff in, interestingly. Or pull it back if your sound was unusually thick. We can drive a little more. Drive very quickly gets you action there. And I know you're waiting, since I've demonstrated scope and girth and drive, but what the heck is skronk? Let's go over to the guitar. Guitars lend themselves to this kind of sound. If I cut it, we get this sort of more hi-fi 70s mellow chill kind of sound. Notice that it's not actually cutting output level. We're getting something out of it as well. Lower frequency stuff comes into focus this way. But if we boost it, and again, that's without adding scope. I can even cut scope while I'm doing that. It kind of reaches out and scrapes on your eardrums. It's the upper mids. It's where the fire of the sound pops out. You can throw on back to that verse. This gives you an articulation on things. Again, at the moment, that's the only thing that I'm boosting. It gives you this articulation on things.
Nearly what I deserve.
Where there, and this is the track with that annoying ride cymbal, so it's bringing out that ride cymbal as well. It's bringing out all the things. And the vocals get this sort of, I don't know, walkie-talkie quality, where there's more body if you have it flat, so you can balance it. And kind of go for setting up a sound based on these qualities rather than thinking of it in terms of frequencies. Like there's no narrow bands on this. That's more or less for the mixing stage. This is very much for, can we do the overall sense of highs, the overall sense of fullness, the density of it all. And it all combines together. All of these dials manipulate multiple things. The crossovers in the Kalman filters going into the mid-range relate to the setting of skronk, the setting of girth. All of these things interact in such a way that the hope is you can use this to dial in a mastering for something and get lots of related songs to sit together with each other appropriately in sound. Like if one of them got bright and grating, you can rein it back with very little in the way of, you shouldn't have to crank anything. In fact, the controls are dialed way, way back from what the original mastering that I was doing on stream had. It's so much restricted from where it started out, and that's what I found was necessary to get it to be usable. So my hope with this, and I'm sure it's an overly ambitious hope, this one you shouldn't be able to ruin anything with. And that's a very ambitious statement. I'm sure that's not true. But the idea is you shouldn't be able to unwittingly ruin anything with this by just messing around with it and going, oh, that's cool. That made it a whole different thing. Sounds interesting. Well, it shouldn't be able to wreck what you've got very easily. I left a lot of range for getting fairly aggressive with things. But really what's going on is when you're looking at meter and seeing that tiny boosts in girth are shifting where the dots on meter, which are where peaks land, it's shifting where those dots land real aggressively. And my idea around mastering is being able to work on all of that peak energy stuff that I think has enormous importance, but that it's not easy to hear directly. In particular, over headphones, like lovely headphones, I can't hear peaks very well on them. Even using cans, and I'm working on some presets for cans in that I'll tell people what to set it to match like my listening room and my upstairs listening position. I'm working on that as well. But the hope is that in conjunction with using Airwindows Meter, you can use Airwindows Mastering to take mixes that are done very freely and creatively and rein them in and make them sit in an appropriate way with the ability to get stuff to be hard-hitting. And like, if your stuff was kind of weak and you assumed that you needed to limit and boost and do all these kinds of things, anything that you'd want to do, you can probably do by doing a little bit of boost to the skronk and a little bit of boost to the girth and a little bit of boost to the scope and then some boost to the drive. All of those things will take just about any mix into the zone of aggressively big and bombastic. And the reason is that they're not just frequency bands. They're all kind of nonlinear. They're all Kalman filters. And drive runs Airwindows Zoom on all of those bands independently. meaning that they all have this additional layer of nonlinearity that dovetails with the way the Kalman filters fit together to make it like, this is why I had to dial it back so hardcore, is because the original one became uncontrollable really easily. And this hopefully will not be as uncontrollable. And there you have it. I hope you enjoy Airwindows Meter and enjoy mastering for working with Airwindows Meter, which has in fact been out for some time now. And it's January. January is usually a month where I kind of have to fall back on taking a breather and building up energy again for the amount of work that I do. I've got another plugin waiting in the queue, and it is a guitar hall reverb. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. And on my live streams, what I'm doing lately is mixing using Console X. I could also very well be doing mastering using Airwindows Mastering if I finished doing the mixing that I need to do. But I'm trying to put together an EP of the stuff that I came up with in 2023, starting around January, in fact, of 2023. And hopefully I will get that done. I will certainly drop the guitar thing, and I've been asked for some other stuff as well. For instance, I was being asked for a convolution plugin which can convolve a left channel with right channel or vice versa. And that sounds interesting because I can think of ways to use that in mix to make terrible, horrible, awesome noises. And so I'm probably going to try to put that together because it'll be fairly simple. I just don't know who else has done one. And I don't have to get too heavy into like figuring out how to make sidechains work in my Antique plugin workflow, because I can just do a left-right, and I know that I can route things in Reaper into left and right channels as I see fit. So all of that should be doable. And I'll get back to work. Catch up with me on the live streams. I'm certainly going to be doing more mixes. So if people are curious about how you make Console X work, I'll be literally doing that. And I'm pleased with how it's working out. I feel like Console X is doing what it was meant to do, and I'm happy with what I'm getting out of it. And I'm also starting to get better ideas for Console H, which would be the hip-hop version, whereas Console X is all about the 70s and 80s star power console emulation, where no matter what you've got, it's going to make all your guitars and hair metal vocals or whatever sound like fairy dust has been sprayed over them, and they're the most exciting things in the world and sound like themselves. Console H, I feel, needs to be the reimagining and reinventing sounds one, where rather than maximizing the amount of energy and attention and verisimilitude you get off of sounds to make them sound more like themselves. I feel like Console H needs to dedicate itself to reimagining and reinventing sounds, so that like if you were, say, taking a bunch of Beatles samples, nothing you could do with Console H would ever stop you identifying that those are Beatles samples from across the room or down the street. It's designed to highlight all of those characteristics so that you instantly just know. And you're like, oh my God, they're amazing. Console H should let you make a mix using those Beatles samples. And if you go hard enough with them, you'd be able to put them up on YouTube. And Content ID wouldn't recognize them at all. But that takes some doing. So I'll be working on that. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.